Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I'll tell you what, today's guest is someone who I've been so excited to chat with because this is someone who has had an incredible career, not only helping other companies grow, but growing his own enterprises and making a big difference in the lives of so many high performers, so many professionals and leaders, and also so many businesses. Because this is somebody that if there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be, this is someone who not only knows the right questions to ask, but knows how to help you find those right answers. So let me tell you all about today's guest. His name is Dennis Duitch. Dennis has a background in accounting, in audit, tax, infrastructure, and marketing, and as a business manager to Los Angeles entertainment industries such as directors, actors, agencies, musicians. You know as well, if you've been listening to the show for a long time, that as someone who lived in Los Angeles, I know what it takes to succeed in the entertainment industry from afar. So seeing Dennis do that, he's got so many lessons and stories and experiences and perspectives to share with us here today. After serving in 3 offices of a national CPA firm spanning from Chicago to San Francisco to Beverly Hills, Dennis founded his own CPA and business management practice, which grew to become one of California's largest independent firms and subsequently acquired by a public company. He now serves primarily as a guidance counselor to entrepreneurs launching new and emerging businesses, C-level leadership of successful or troubled companies, as well as high-income, high-wealth celebrities, individuals, and families. He also serves as a director on advisory boards for not-for-profit organizations and professional service firms nationwide. He's been dubbed, I love this explanation of the work that Dennis does. He's essentially a business therapist that knows how to take you to where you want to go. So I'm excited about this. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Dennis Duitch. All right, Dennis, I'm so excited that you're here with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. My pleasure. I watched your show, many of your clips, and I learn from them, and so it's my pleasure to give something back if it's useful to your clients.
Heck yeah, I so appreciate that, Dennis. Honestly, that means the world to us. We obviously love the fact that we get to create so much content for entrepreneurs, and yes, all of you entrepreneurs all around the world. But Dennis, it's because of amazing entrepreneurs like you who are so generous and transparent with your knowledge and experiences. So let's kick things off by taking us beyond the bio. You obviously have accomplished so much in your career and life, and you continue to help others. Talk to us about who the heck is Dennis? How did you start doing all these cool things?
Well, I started off as a practicing CPA in a big office, and I moved around a few times, and I ended up with business management is an expression which is used in Los Angeles and New York in particular, Nashville, for helping people who have a lot of issues, a lot of money, and they're very clear on their goals and what they want to do in life when they grow up. But they're not. They really don't know how to get there. So, depending on the professionals that they deal with, they either learn A or B or C or D, one thing at a time, and often it turns into conflict. So, what I opted to do was to cover all those areas. I'm a guidance counselor. My tagline in my website, one of them is that I'm a business therapist. I sit with people and help them figure out what do you want to be when you grow up? What's your goal? What does it look like? Is there not just clarity, but is there consensus with the other people that you're working with to get there, whether it's your business team or whether it's your one partner or whether it's a spouse? And then if there's clarity in those goals, I can help people determine what are the mechanisms to reach those goals, and those are called objectives. I teach business school, and we break them down into first your goals, then your objectives, and then and only then the actual tactics that it'll take to get there.
Yeah, I love that overview for so many reasons, Dennis. First of which is that I love that you called out in the entertainment industry, you said it very succinctly. There's a lot of people with a lot of money and a lot of problems. And obviously, a lot of times we think as especially beginner entrepreneurs that when we have more money, we're not gonna have problems. They're all gonna resolve themselves. But of course, that isn't the case. Of course, we have problems at all different stages in business. Talk to us about some of those common business problems. And I'm curious because you've worked with businesses of all different sizes and industries and shapes. With that perspective and with your vantage point, do those problems change over time? Does the nature of them change? I'd love to hear your insights into the types of problems that we're all facing in business.
Well, I think the fundamental problem is, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the absence of clarity, the absence of goals that are clear. Because without those, what happens is people go off in directions, any direction, what presents itself, and very often spend a lot of time and energy in arenas that don't support the goals. In probably the biggest single problem is probably the fact that most business men and women surround themselves with people who end up being what's called yes men or yes women. They nod and they tell them what they want to hear. They really don't have the big perspective, partly because it hasn't been shared. That's another issue. But they don't get honest appraisals as to the risks that go along with the decisions that they're making. I have one client that calls me Dr. D, but the D stands for devil. Because I'm the one that brings up, I'm a devil's advocate. I bring up the issues that and the problems and the risks that they haven't heard and really don't want to hear, but need to if they're going to try to optimize their purpose, which is it ranges from productivity to profitability to stability and valuation. As a mediator, I deal with everything from two partners who had a dispute over the business to people who have disputes over money or products to men and women who are involved in mediation of I need to mediate their prenuptial agreements or their divorce settlements. The point is they can't talk to each other because they oftentimes don't let the full sentence be heard, but also because they're not clear enough on their own priorities.
Yeah, I love how many of your answers, even already this early on in the conversation, keep coming back to that step one of you got to set those objectives. You have to have clarity on what direction it is that you're going in. Dennis, that's probably, it's funny, we're talking about problems here. It's probably the biggest and first problem that a lot of people really struggle with is to even know where am I going and where do I want to go? For listeners, obviously, we've all heard so many different facets of business advice, like having a business plan, maybe 1, 3, 5, 10 years looking outward, or have a North Star as far as your values and your mission go. What's your take on it? How do we start even setting that direction that we all want to move in?
Well, defining a goal is a start point. For example, people say, well, I want to retire. Well, what does that mean? Well, I want to not have to work so much and so forth and so on. Well, is your time span a year, 5 years, 10 years? What do you think? Well, I really haven't thought about it. Well, let's think about it. That's the point. It's pinning down a clear objective, goal here, so that we can then put the pieces of the puzzle in place, again called objectives, which will help reach that. And equally important is to avoid decisions and steps and direction that is not only may not be productive in getting there, but may be contrary and may slow down and even defeat the purpose. As an educator, I've taught graduate students in business school, but I've also taught sixth graders for 5 years, a few mornings a week. It's the same situation. It's people without clarity as to what they want to achieve. Obviously, there's a difference in the thinking process of an 11 or 12-year-old versus a person who says they want to get out of the business they're in, or they want to get out of business entirely. I want to have enough money to live on. Well, what does it, to retire on? Well, what does that mean? And for what purpose? Usually I get involved. At this point, my CPA practice was acquired by a public company, so I was able to keep the consultancy division. But usually what happens is people come to me, they're referred to me because they've run into an obstacle. They just say, gee, I'm not getting to where I want to be. Well, where did you want to be? Well, I thought I'd have enough money without worrying about blah, blah, blah. But it's much deeper than that. So again, my role is to help them figure out, using my own skills in not just accounting and finance, but in decades of dealing with businesses of all types and people of all types, as to what they're really trying to achieve and what they're trying to avoid, which is quite relevant. But it's a form of, as you mentioned, business therapy. I'm a business analyst.
Yeah, I'm going to tag on to that because I'm sure that part of your role as a business therapist is also it must bleed sometimes into a personal therapist, because now you're talking about what people want and where they want to go and clarity. These are all very big topics that are hard to get right for people. It requires a level of intentionality to sit down and self-reflection to get there. Dennis, what's your approach when people either say, well, I don't know what I want? Obviously, you guide them down that line of questioning. But I guess my bigger question to you is, in a world where things are so fluid, and especially in business, things are always changing. Look at 2020. None of us expected COVID to happen. That threw a lot of wrenches into so many of our plans and objectives. With that in mind, how do you balance having that North Star, that direction we want to go in, with the real life fluidity of business? You talk about some of the life things we all face along the way. How do you balance that?
Well, I think the key is that the key, if there is a key, is reality check. And most people, but neither have an awareness of what reality is, and I try to help them understand that. But secondly, how important that is, because it's much easier for people to dream and to say, well, here's what I'd like to have happen. Here's how I picture it. Great. We've got a picture of the future, but it's just unrealistic. Well, in 5 years, I'd like to own a house in the mountains and have a yacht that'll take me to my some island that I also own. Well, okay, let's work backwards. In order to do that, we'd probably have to have financing of something, which is unrealistic for where you are today, unless you have a secret rich uncle who's going to leave you mega millions. Point is, I'm continually bringing people back to reality. Let's deal with what you want, but let's deal with the logical and sensible and realistic potential to achieve it.
Yeah, I love that fact, especially because you are speaking to us not only as a business therapist and as a fellow entrepreneur, but also with your past CPA hat on. Is that, what does a CPA do? You only look at the facts. Here are the financial statements in front of me. This is the reality of that situation. How much? Because I would imagine that your work, you've already talked about how it has to do with both business, but also the reality of life situations. I'm picturing actors and musicians. Gosh, there's probably so much life stuff that factors into their ability to perform and show up continuously. How much of that reality check focuses on, here's the financial situation, but what are those other ingredients that you focus on to paint that picture of what reality is?
Well, like anything in life, it's about how you allocate your time. So people, yes, I deal with the entertainment industry. I also am a musician. I actually still play in a couple of classic rock and roll bands. I am an artist, a sculptor. And so that for people who are doing that solely, that is their focus and only their focus. So then when they say, well, I'd also like to have my picture of my life also needs to include owning a business. I've had people who said, well, I've always wanted to own a restaurant. Why would you want to own a restaurant? Well, because I have ideas about this, this, and this, and this. I said, well, have you ever worked in a restaurant? Do you know anybody who has, and so forth? Well, no, not really. But I said, are you aware that the owners of restaurants often are the people who are the last ones to leave at night for a variety of reasons that I can go through? Anyway, to get them to grasp the common sense that goes along with a reality check, they haven't even given thought to it. So I'm bringing up more questions than I have answers. In the practice, I'm a mediator, and in mediation, The way I do it is it's called informal mediation, only with the principals, not with their attorneys, not with their mother-in-laws, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm the one who asks the questions and to get them to answer and talk to each other. And those are the steps that very seldom get taken when people are in conflict. But they also happen in business. The owners of businesses, the directors, the city executives have a tendency to do what they think they should be doing without genuine consultation with the people who work around them, with their team. And so unless the team I mentioned before, unless the team is working in consensus together, what happens is, for positive, what happens is it never reaches optimization. It never gets to the potential it could. But what also can happen is chaos, and in some cases, disaster. You mentioned the pandemic. There are people that had issues that came up they had never even thought of before, not just the cash flow, whether they could get the products on the shelf or whether they could get the time to get people together who couldn't commute, get between cities and so forth. Anyway, so I am a question answer more than a problem solver.
Yeah, I love that distinction that you just painted for us. And especially because you also layered it with that example from the restaurant industry. As someone who has family in the restaurant industry, you are spot on. Can they make good money? Yes. Do they make good money? Yes. But are they also the same ones who have missed the most family events, weddings, all of those things? Absolutely. And these are things that people don't think about. And so I think that you have a unique advantage because you've been at the various stages of business. You've been at the beginning. You've also been at the end. You've had your CPA practice acquired, for example. How much of that, because so much of our conversation today is focused on the reality of the present, but also that future planning. Where along the way, Dennis, for you personally, did you say, you know what, I would like to one day get acquired. This is my exit strategy, because we're all in the midst of the day-to-day trying to figure out how we're going to get from today to tomorrow, but you've looked way beyond that and you've lived beyond that. Talk to us about how early on that exit strategy comes to mind.
Well, as I mentioned, I think I was moved around by the firm that I was with. I ended up in Los Angeles, which is wonderful. But after leaving them and founding my own firm, it became a situation where I was spending more time each day in arenas that I prefer not to. My life is balanced, and I've always tried to do that. As I mentioned, I do a lot of other things and other activities. But at some point, I said, okay, the time that I'm spending in business isn't just the time that I enjoy, which is counseling clients and helping them reach their life objectives. But I also had, it grew to about 80 employees. And out of that group, a great number required, for lack of a better word, babysitting. So I was spending my day helping them focus in order to get the work done for the clients that we had. And I said, this is not what I want to do forever. And let's pick a timeline, and then let's work towards that. So positioning my own company, my own firm, for a space, a position that was attractive to an acquirer. That's what I do for other people, help them position so that they can reach their goals by some reasonable time frame, and with a realistic result.
Yeah, I really appreciate those insights, because nothing happens by mistake in life or in business. And that shows that level of intentionality, is that you took inventory of your own life, which I want to talk about your life in just a second, but you took inventory of your own life and what you enjoyed to do. And then you said, hey, this isn't aligned. I want to make a change here. Let's set that barrier, or let's set that objective and goal and outcome, and then let's work towards that. And sure enough, it didn't happen by mistake. You made that happen. So I love hearing those real life perspectives. And I want to bring it back to life, because you talk about living a balanced life. Dennis, you do a lot of things, very cool things as well. I'm glad that you shouted out that you're a sculptor. It's something that I for sure wanted to bring up here today. Talk to us about how you manage that, because I like that you pointed out you practice what you preach. You do so many things, from teaching to sculpting to being a musician to, of course, your actual business consulting is something you continue to do. How do you balance all of that, Dennis?
Well, there's no rigid rule. It's not like I get up and there are people that are running. They go out and running 3 miles every morning at exactly 8 a.m. That kind of thing. So on any given day, it's a matter of me feeling like where am I going to be the most effective. I think that it's important that people, back to reality check, focus on what they can do, not just what they dream of doing. I got into, for example, into sculpting because I used to be a pretty good tennis player, but I tore up my arm bad enough that I had to have surgery and I had to have some titanium shoulder, which ended my tennis and my golf and a lot of those kind of sports. So I had to do something that I could function on in reality. And I said, I appreciate art and sculpture and so forth. And I said, let's try it and see what happens. And I was good enough that, I don't know, you might be able to see one of my pieces is right behind my desk here. It's bronze. It weighs 20 pounds. But I figured out a way that I could use the skills that I had left, in this case, using my arms and hands. And then it evolved. And then I said, wow, I could really do something with this. And now I have probably 100 sculptures, and it's sold and been sold in galleries. But it was reality check. I'm back to what I started with in an earlier question and answer.
Yeah, I do love that perspective. And by the way, I've been staring at that piece our entire conversation here today, wondering if that's yours. So I love that you gave me some clarity on that. That's very cool. And also, speaking of tennis, for example, I'm totally related to that. I'm so bummed about your shoulder or arm because it would be so much fun if we could play tennis on the same court one day in Southern California, but it is not to be. But I will tell you this, that tennis and chess are two things that came into my life at the same time. So it was in my late 20s. It was actually when I moved to Los Angeles. A very wise businessman told me, now that you live in this city, either pick up tennis or golf. It sounds like you picked both tennis, but
Not both, that's correct.
I definitely stuck with just tennis. And with that in mind, though, I supplemented it. Chess, I think, is the ultimate mind game. I think there's so many similarities between chess and tennis. One thing that I love about chess is people always talk about the difference between strategy and tactics. And what I love about your work and your attitude towards business is that you are a strategist at heart, but you also are able to tie those goals and objectives to those tactics that fill in that gap of where we are and where we want to be. Talk to us about your strategic mindset and how strategy and tactics play into these.
Well, that's a good question. And by the way, I'll take you on in chess any day. For example, to the extent that I have clients that want to grow their business, we try to define what that means. But maybe it means another location. Maybe they're in the retail business or they're in the marketing business and want to expand to another continent. The idea is fine, but positioning, I'll come back to that word for it, requires a very deliberate process in order to get the financing to do it. For example, you need to be in a position to show that your current business is not only, effective and profitable, but that you, meaning the owner in this case, were able to do forecasting earlier in life and then meet your forecast to come up with the numbers that are now profitable enough or cash flow enough that you can get the new financing. So I'm the one who helps people design, for example, let's talk about forecasting. What do you think you can do right now today without any changes? And can we set targets that we can later say, here was our target and we exceeded it. Okay, now let's go to a forecast and say, well, what if we added things? What if we added the financing you want? What if we're able to obtain the extra 2 locations or whatever? What would happen then? And do another forecast of I've proven what I know how to do, which is think it through intelligently, do a financial picture with help from professionals, I and or other people in my firm, and meet that target. So given that, and given where I am today, here's a realistic expectation that I have for going to the next level, which is why I need capital investors or why I need bank financing. And positioning in order to when we head that direction, positioning in order to convince the people that we know what we're doing, It's not just some dream. Gee, if you gave me $1 million, I think I could, write 10 books and become a global seller. Is the difference between achieving the success level. Remember, it's goals and then objectives. Well, the objective is to be able to get the money that I need when I need, or to find the location, or to convince someone to let me have this business as opposed to a competitor. And then the tactics to reach it are the functional doing, planning, setting up, hiring people, the right people in the right positions, and so forth. On an overall basis, it's not rocket science. What I'm describing are they've been written in various textbooks by all sorts of people. I've been teaching it in classes for years and years, and it's simple concept. The application has to do with one's diligence, setting the direction, and then staying on top of it and pursuing it.
Yeah, to that last point, Dennis, I think this is such an important place for us to go in this conversation. Is I feel like within the realm of any entrepreneurial conversation, and in our podcast, we do this as well, is that it's easy to turn to trends, technology, advancements. And right now, a lot of people want to talk about AI, and it's something we do talk about here on this show, but something that I have felt, so I'm in year 16 of my entrepreneurial journey. I started my first business when I was 19. And the older and more mature that I get as a person and as an entrepreneur, I realize that there's so many lessons to be gleaned, not from the new successes, but from the people who have been in the game for as long as I have, or Dennis tagging onto that, as long as you have, because you've seen the longevity. You've seen, my word of this year for 2024 is building. When I look at buildings now, buildings don't get built to withstand, the pressures for a year. They are meant to stand for decades or centuries, which is why, as someone who grew up in Boston, I love our historic buildings. And Dennis, for you, business is that way as well. You're not talking about tech. You're talking about business fundamentals and core strategies. Talk to us about that mindset and why it is that we're not talking about tech, which can sometimes distract people.
Well, tech is one means to an end. AI is the newest game in town. Frankly, I think it's probably the most critical development to come about. And since the last critical changes in business were brought about by things like the development of GPS. Okay, think of before GPS and how people use it today, and it's become an integral part of everything that gets done. Computers, the very development of technology. But AI is going to change many, many things. I can tell you this, in today's structuring, two factors which often were overlooked are coming into play. One is, what does AI mean to you? Assuming you can understand it and you want to invest in it, what's it going to do to your basic operation? The people that work for you, are you going to need fewer or more people? Are they going to be people that you care about replacing? And the other is that what's all this going to do to your own balance in your personal life? Now, beyond the activities, like I'm involved in a handful of things, but comes family. As a mediator, I get involved in many situations where my job is to help them settle the assets and the property without going to court and having attorneys fighting, communicating as opposed to the individuals communicating. But what happens is that when those have happened, it's typically not because the business was a problem. It's because their personal relationships, their personal life became a problem. In my own case, I've been married for 40 years in another month or two, and I have 4 children, and I have one's on the way. I'll soon have 11 grandchildren. I'm blessed. But the point is, if the balance in life doesn't include, I don't even mean responsibilities, because that exists too, but I'm talking about the pleasures that one can derive from a life that has nothing to do with business other than the financing that comes from business that allows it to be led one way or another. It doesn't matter how successful the business ended up, whether you met every goal in business, if you lost the goals in the other aspects of life that are often more important.
Yeah, incredibly important advice and wisdom from you here today, Dennis. And I think that it's clear to me as someone who gets to interact with you here today how important family is. It's something that keeps coming back to you. And I think that it really shows your overall attitude towards life and business is that we're here to live good things across the entire spectrum. And again, I keep coming back. It seems like we've really found the themes of today's topic, which is that intentionality of these things don't happen by mistake. And it is all about goals and objectives and the reality check. So I think it's so poignant that all of your work always comes back to these fundamental ingredients because it's not only important, but I think it's really powerful because it's things that are actionable for us to set these building blocks in our lives. And with that said, I want to selfishly ask you this question as someone who is a millennial. I so respect and appreciate the work that you do inside the classroom as well. And I know that people talk a lot about the younger generations. And even I'm starting to feel like I don't understand these younger generations. You get to work with them inside of the classroom. Dennis, what are some of the things that you see that's different about the generation that's coming through business schools right now that if you can impart some wisdom from your vantage point in them, what is it that you hope they understand about the world and about business?
I think that, and this is a sad situation, but I think that the focus of today's, the millennials, yes, but the Z Gen as well, is mostly money. In other words, dollars per se. I want to get money. I want to. Now that there's this whole other arena of wanting to help the world and change the world and so forth. But when the focus is on the money that comes from their business endeavors, as opposed to the value of the endeavors, the value of what the business is providing to others, and that translates to money second or third, what happens is their emphasis, their priorities, their thought process gets channeled to the point where they forget about the rest of it. And that's what's happening. I think today's kids, again, beyond the values and trying to change the world and so forth for good in many cases, but when it comes to what am I going to do to earn a living so I can survive, suddenly it's on, okay, how much money can I get? How quickly can I get it? How easily can I get it? And without regard to the actual, I know it sounds silly to say that joy can come from business endeavors, but they can. In my case, when I can help somebody meet their objectives, that's the pleasure that comes back. Gratitude is the wrong word, and certainly in education, students don't, or children, for the many cases, don't express gratitude for guidance. But if there's a way of knowing that what one is doing in life is purposeful as well as rewarding economically, it's a major difference. And I think in the older geezer generation, mine, there was more focus on that than there seems to be today.
Yes, amen to that. I think that is a conversation that we don't have enough publicly within the world of business or entrepreneurship. And I'm so appreciative of you sharing those insights with us here today, Dennis. I think it's such an important message for all of us. And for me, I think back to the realities of my situation. For example, I've had multiple businesses. I had an agency that I was not in love with. My life was not great when I was running it. The money was great, but I didn't have the life. And now I get to have amazing conversations with entrepreneurs like yourself, Dennis. And people always ask me, aren't you exhausted at the end of a production day where I do 8 of these high energy conversations? And the answer is no, I gain energy from this stuff. It does add. You use the word joy, and I think that's so important. So with all of that said, there's a lot of homework. There's a lot of food for thought. You talked about questions more so than solutions here today. And I think that that's where listeners need to go from here. With that in mind and all the introspective thoughts that listeners will walk away from, what's that one action? We love action here on this show. What's the one thing you hope every listener, wherever they are in their entrepreneurial journey, when this episode finishes playing, they say, you know what? I'm going to do this thing now because Dennis recommended I do it.
Well, that is a question. I would say that at the end of the day, literally the end of the day, before retiring for the night, to think back and say, did I balance my life today in a manner that was, for the most part, pleasant, enjoyable, worthwhile? Did I provide benefit to others, whether it was family or business, whatever that means? And can I feel like I was as productive as I could have been? Did I contribute to my own life, my own purpose, my own goals and objectives? But did I also contribute something to humanity, for lack of a better word? And if not, then when I wake up tomorrow morning, I need to rebalance a little bit. I need to focus somehow elsewise in order to achieve that.
Yeah, really powerful advice there, especially because that last part, Dennis, is whether our answer is in the affirmative or not. When we ask ourselves that question at the end of the day, we always get the next day to choose what we want to do with that day. And it's that level of intentionality that makes me so appreciate and really admire the work that you do. And I know that listeners are going to be keen. Before I toss it over to you to drop those links on us of where listeners can find more of your work, I just want to say that on your website, listeners, I obviously have gone all through Dennis's work here ahead of today's conversation. This is someone who not only gives value through his work, but this is someone who shows up like he showed up here today with so much knowledge and wisdom and experience, but also he does it on a regular occurrence. On his website, you'll find publications written by him with articles like Business Success Demands Structure, Systems, and Leadership, or The 3 Most Important Factors Why Businesses Fail. There's so much goodness that Dennis continues to put into the world. So Dennis, now that I've had my say on it, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Thank you. Well, I'll just mention also that I do a great deal of pro bono work. I not just for nonprofit foundations and so forth, but for people. Before I take on a client that I know I can help and I will charge a fee for, before that happens, I'll sometimes spend 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours helping them understand where they need to go. Because if I don't think that they want to get somewhere concrete that I can help with, I don't even want to be involved, and I don't ask for a retainer. But my website, my business website is Duitch Consulting, DUITCH consulting.com. And there's all sorts of ways there to get a hold of me. Again, I'm happy to talk to anybody. I spend a lot of time with students just helping them get focused as a courtesy. My sculpture website is under my stage name, which I use for music and art. And I've also had a few published poetry books. Hey, because I have a chance, I can just show you this is one of them. It's called Thoughts on Life. Whoops. There we go. Thoughts on Life, End of an Era. With one of my sculptures, but I do that under the name Dennis Gray, Gray. That happens to be my middle name, and easy to find. DennisGraySculpture.com.
Yes, listeners, you already know the drill. We are making it as easy as possible for you to find those links wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Scroll right on down and find those show notes. We are linking to Dennis's business website, as well as his sculpture website, as well as his personal LinkedIn. If you want to reach out to him, this is someone who's incredibly generous with the way he shows up in the world. You heard it from him firsthand here today. His business website is DeutschConsulting.com. You'll find a phone number, an email address right there on his website. So don't be shy. And Dennis, on behalf of myself and all the listeners around the world, thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Vice versa. I appreciate what you do. As I said, I've listened to many of your other guests, and I've learned from them. And I look forward to a chess game with you someday, Brian.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Dennis.
All right. Okay.